who are you going to fear? One of them could kill your flesh, right? Paro could kill you in the flesh. But it doesn't mean he could kill your soul. And the scriptures talk about not being afraid of those who can kill your flesh. But those who can destroy your soul would be Yodewahe. And so we got two people to choose from, who you're going to fear and who you're going to obey. And that was the fundamental concept of Pesach. Now, next we get into the parashah, and each of these pieces are going to make sense in the whole. So far, we've learned a little bit about the menorah and what it could possibly mean, that he's going to raise up the commandments, lift them up, magnify them, and that's going to bring truth and judgment to his people. Then we see the concept of this switching, going from the Levim coming up over the firstborn, and Israel coming up over Mitzrayim, and we've decided that how we see who's getting switched here is based on obedience and fear, and who they're lined up with. And now we're going to talk about the Shekinah and the trumpet. What is the laws of the trumpet and that moves the people, and the Shekinah, which also moves the people? When it rests, the people are to rest. When it moves, the people are to move, and it leads the way. Now, the trumpet also, when it is blown, the people are gathered. It also sets off the alarm and says which people are supposed to go when. What do they have in common? Well, wind or breath and spirit are all the same word in Hebrew, ruach. And the Shekinah, this cloud, this wind, in my opinion, represents the spirit of Elohim, which leads the people. And the trumpet, when you look at the mechanics of how a trumpet works, it has an outside, an earthly outside, but what really is significant about the trumpet is the wind or breath that you blow through it. And when it vibrates upon the flesh of your lips, when the spirit moves upon the flesh, it creates the sound. And the sound is what moves the people. But it starts from within. The breath that comes within, and it goes out. Now, the Shekinah, same way. The Shekinah dwells in the tabernacle. The tabernacle is like a covering. It's a tent. The covering for us, as Mashiach talks about, is our flesh. Inside, it houses a spirit. And so the spirit, as Mashiach says, when the inside of the cup is clean, the outside will be clean. It bears fruit. And so what's inside comes outside. Now, and it moves you. Your actions can be followed back inside to a spirit. That can be good or bad. Spirit of rebellion can bear fruit of rebellion. A spirit of righteousness bears fruit of righteousness. And so the Shekinah is the spirit which moves the tabernacle. And with the trumpet, the spirit, the wind, the breath that comes in here, moves the lips and actually sounds a trumpet which moves the people. All these models are similar. So we're going to see this concept we're going to call the spirit moves. So next we're going to talk about, in the parashah, the complaining about the bread. That's the next part. So what happened was the people had been given something from Yodewahe, but they weren't satisfied with it. They wanted, it was bread from heaven, which is almost like saying it's spiritual bread. And what they wanted was the food of Egypt, which models the earth, the earthly things. And so you have this pattern that they wanted these spiritual things, or they were given spiritual things, but they wanted what was back in Egypt, things of the earth. And in this case, the things of God weren't good enough. They wanted also to seek after meat, which in this case, the meat represents, when you read in the New Testament about the milk and the meat, it's considered something that's more advanced. Milk is for children and meat is for adults. So in this scenario, what we see here is that there's a complaining. They want the meat. And that complaining comes, as we already learned, from a spirit of dissatisfaction, a spirit of rejection of the things that Elohim gives. And so they want something else. And now we're going to take that, we're going to set that on the shelf. Now we're going to talk about the elders. So we're just going to identify what the mechanic of all these things are and then tie them all together and see what makes sense. The elders are given the Spirit. This is an interesting thing because now we've talked about the Spirit moving you, we've talked about the spirit of complaining, right? And the spirit of righteousness and obedience and fear, which causes you to do the things that Yodewahe wants, and how he will take those people who do those things that he wants, who come with the right spirit, and he'll elevate them, and he'll take those people who have the wrong spirit, and he'll decrease them or diminish them. So these elders were brought from among the people, and Moshe wanted some help, and I'm not going to get into it because there's a beautiful example here, but I'll probably save that for another video, of the elders being this model of Moshe's helper. And essentially he needs help, but what they do is they take the spirit, it says, that was upon Moshe, and they put it upon these elders so that he can help them, because he's trying to bear these children, as it says. He asks, did I conceive all of these children? And it's very interesting, but these elders were just elders. But when they received the right spirit, they changed from just being elders of the people to being elevated to a higher level. And this higher level enables them to prophesy and help the people out. So this goes back to the same concept of what comes inside. How does that go out? If you've got a good spirit, it bears fruit, it elevates you. When you have a negative spirit, you'll be brought down low and humbled. And so we talk about the advanced things, which was Miriam and Aharon. Here was some people who were beneath Moshe, who thought, hey, he doesn't just talk to Moshe, maybe we can elevate ourselves. Now certainly Aharon was the high priest, but Miriam, she wasn't at that level of Aharon and Moshe. She would have been probably third on the list. And so the lowest had, in some ways, because you have to ask the question, why did Yodewahe only punish Miriam? On the surface, it looks like, she got the leprosy and for speaking against Moshe, but Aharon spoke against Moshe, or it seems like maybe she was speaking for both of them, but so she gets leprosy. So again, we have a situation where someone who's lower tries to elevate above the higher. And when you try and take that position that wasn't given to you, she actually got brought lower. So there's a very interesting pattern that we're going to see here through the scriptures, that this concept of rising up when you didn't have right, you were brought down lower. And it also talks about Moshe being the humblest of all men. Here's the humblest, the lowest, and yet he's elevated higher. So I think this Parashat Beha'alotcha really talks about two things. It talks about what Mashiach said when he said, the high will be brought down low, and the low will be lifted up high. And we certainly see this over and over again. And I think that this parasha actually even gives us some reasoning why. Because the spirit within them. Because that spirit moved their actions. And if that's a spirit of complaining, or pride, or lusting for things or positions that weren't given to you, you not only won't get those positions going after it that way, you'll actually be brought down lower. And that yet that spirit of humility, of not wanting it, of just service, of doing the service of the tabernacle like the Levi'im, that when you're that servant spirit, you'll be lifted up above the people. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up with that, with going back to that original concept of Mashiach lifting up the Torah, and that was going to cause truth to come into the judgment of the people. What he was doing essentially was he was the great servant. He was lifting up the Torah, magnifying the commandments, and by doing them, by serving first, and keeping the commandments himself, and teaching others, as it says, the person who did it, which was the servitude, the honor, the burden of keeping the Torah himself, then, and taught others to do it, he was greatest in the kingdom. He was elevated up. And those, of course, who wouldn't do them, who wouldn't serve and do what was right, sacrifice and suffer and do what was expected of them, and teaching others to do that, they will be brought down low. And that's what we see in this week's parasha. So